Thank you for joining us for hashtag UnwokeID 2022. This conference is going to focus on unethical issues in contemporary international development and policy and practice. My name is Dr. Jessie Hansen DeFusco, and I am joined by Dr. Camila Morales from the University of Texas in Dallas. This conference is funded and supported by the Office of Research and Innovation in partnership with the School of Economics, Political and Policy Science, as well as the International Center. We are also working in collaboration with the Harvard Alumni for Education's Sub-Saharan Africa chapter and the University of Pittsburgh's African Studies Center, as well as a dozen other partners who work in international development research and practice around the world. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome. I am Dr. Inga Musselman, Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost of the University of Texas at Dallas. We thank you for your participation in our virtual conference, hashtag UnwokeID, Ethical Issues in 21st Century International Development Policy and Practice. UT Dallas takes great pride in our institutional mission to support diversity, inclusion, and social justice worldwide in a variety of ways. The university offers an array of diverse academic and research opportunities with a large international student, faculty, and researcher population. At the heart of our work, UT Dallas provides the nation and the world with excellent, innovative education and research. The university, while striving to improve educational and research programs in the arts and sciences, engineering, and management, is committed to mentoring active citizens whose education has prepared them for rewarding lives and productive careers in a constantly changing world. Additionally, as a Tier 1 research institution, we are committed to using our reach to uplift the voices of diverse perspectives to make the world more just and equitable. In collaboration with UT Dallas's Office of Research and Innovation, the School of Economic, Political, and Policy Sciences, and the International Center, this inaugural conference will bring researchers and professional practitioners together with special focus on representation from the Global South. We have guest speakers from all corners of the globe, many of whom have devoted their lives and professions to making the world a better place, especially for the most marginalized and vulnerable through international development and nonprofit. Our featured presenters will share their expertise on critical issues such as violent, coercive, or paternalistic policy and programming in international aid, unethical practices in international development partnerships between international stakeholders and national partners, unequitable representation, concerns of limited or ignored voices and perspectives by host national and regional development experts, nonprofit workers, and beneficiaries, and the struggle for transcultural and multicultural perspectives in the promotion of globalized human rights and a globalized economy. The purpose of this conference is to give voice to practitioners and researchers from the Global South and to collaboratively advance a scholarly dialogue that may help inform vital change to contemporary policy and programming in low-income regions. This conference will be broadcast live on the university's Microsoft Teams platform. The presentations will also be made available on our website for wider audience viewing. Thank you for taking part in hashtag UnwokeID.
Thank you for joining Day 2 of the first annual hashtag UnwokeID, Ethical Issues in 21st Century International Development. My name is Dr. Camila Morales from the University of Texas at Dallas. This conference seeks to expand the dialogue of contemporary issues that potentially still exist today in international development. Today, we will feature guest speakers who work as practitioners in the Global South, in countries like Benin and Liberia. Our first speaker today will be Dr. Fidel Mark Haunovi. Dr. Haunovi is a clinical psychologist and expert in community health. He is a practitioner, a researcher, and professor in community health in universities in Benin. His presentation today is entitled VaxTrack Project Implementation in Benin, 5 years later issues of sustainability and poor project development. Benin, like many countries in Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, faces the challenge of the quality of immunization data, which made it difficult to predict the response of the diseases in question viable by vaccination. Dr. Haunovi highlights how Western-led programs can, at times, miss the mark of affecting meaningful change and at times make large promises that they do not keep. This work can involve the appropriation of work and ideas from Global South partners, leaving them discouraged and feeling taken advantage of afterwards. His experiences reflect those of many in low-income nations and serves as a crucial and heroic case study for international development experts to consider. Up next, we'll hear from Tambu Glenda Muzenda and her colleagues. A development strategist and human rights advocate with more than a decade of experience working with donor agencies, corporates, NGOs, and INGOs toward community development and impact investment to local projects with public and private partnerships, including government. Working across the region, she has gained knowledge and experiences that drives her ambitions through learning and contributing to development sector through research, capacity development, monitoring systems, and developing strategies for impact and sustainability. A winner of the 2020 Desmond Tutu Reconciliation Fellowship, she is a driven and ambitious change agent, bringing ideas that are out of the box.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Fidel Mark Haunovi, the clinical psychologist and expert in community health. I was the former Africa Regional Manager of the VaxTrack US NGO, I would like to this morning to share with you the contextual analysis of the VaxTrack projects in Benin 5 years after its closure. The presentation plan will be followed by 5 steps. We'll contextualize, and we will have a brief presentation on the technical development of this project, the key resource of this project that came out from the final evaluation of this project. 5 years later, what is the constant on the field? What is the rest of this project? And we will conclude. The Sustainable Development Goals for a better and more sustainable future of all were set since 2015. And then the implementation of policies and interventions to achieve the sustainable development, the SDG goals required a great partnerships between the North and the Southern countries. Vaccination is one of the key strategies for achieving the SDG 3, number 3, as empower people to live healthy lives and promote well-being at all ages. And Benin, like many sub-Saharan countries, faces the challenge of the quality of vaccination data, which made it difficult to plan for effective response to vaccine preventable diseases. But from 2012 to 2016, the Benin MOH, with the financial support of the Gates Foundation, hosted a fabulous pilot project to make available the country level, a vaccination immunization quality data for decision-making projects. This pilot project was implemented by the Vaxtrack NGO, which is a non-profit organization under American law based in Washington, D.C., with 9 employees from the US and 12 employees in Benin. The project aims to introduce mobile tools in the health system to accurately monitor the vaccination schedule for children received in health facilities in targeted health zones, to reduce errors in AP data reporting, to accurately count the number of children covered by antigens, and improve the efficiency of vaccination units at the health facility level. How was this tool designed? This tool was a mobile tool based on a tablet that was in each health facility, and it was a combination of 4 application app. So we can have the Vaxtrack one, the ComCare, the Biometrack, and Cisco Meraki. And this was to digitize the vaccine card. It was 3 main systems. So we have the ComCare that was used to collect and aggregate the field data collected, and this was moved to MOTEC. And from MOTEC, we can have this data driven to the GHIS2 for being available for all the data, the health managers for decision making. We also have designed a callback system, SMS callback system, to remind the vaccination appointment for the mothers of children under one year. What are the key results of this project in Benin? Let's say that from 2012 to 2015, all the data that were collected, we did not have access to them. We are not informed of, the Benin team was not informed of the reason why this occurred, this arrived, but from the June 2015 to August 2016, we have registered in the system more than 100,000 children. So we did final evaluation of this project that revealed that there was kind improvement. The health workers mastery have mastered the use of computer tools, knowledge, and use of technologies. And this was recognized by the department at the regional health managers, the local actors of the health system also. So we noticed a positive change in attitudes. So the health workers had more confidence and pride at work. We also noticed a positive change in practices. So we have the speed at work very increasing, a better work organization and planning, and a speed ease in the search for children who have missed vaccination appointment. In ordinary, people spend more than 30 minutes to search for vaccine cards for these for people coming for the vaccine. They spend less time people coming. There was a Can we move forward? Okay. We noticed a data quality and storage, an improvement in data quality and storage. We have better, more data accuracy, reliability, and security, and digitization and backup of vaccination data. There was the clinical workflow was also improved. Improvement of communication between health workers and mothers of kids under 5 visiting the vaccination unity, and the decision supporter to ensure vaccine accuracy. We have an ease of report preparation and report reliability, and increased motivation of health workers employed in vaccination. We can see with this graph that we slowly moved from a paperless. We succeed in having 100% equivalence between the data on the cards, vaccination cards, and the data in our mobile tool. This proved that we could move from a paper-based data management in health facilities to a paperless data management, and very much more accuracy and reliability in data quality with our tool. So this is just an example to show that we could move from a paper-based to a paperless system with this tool. What happened 5 years? What is the situation on the field 5 years after this project implementation? We noticed that, unfortunately, 5 years after the implementation of this project, Benin nowadays has no trace of this project. The children and mothers' biometric data collected during 5 years has never been returned to the country. The same actors stole our ideas for the creation of e-health promotion NGO in Benin to stimulate the creation of e-health Africa in Nigeria. I think this NGO exists today and is operating in Nigeria and in other countries of Africa. The mobile application for the system management in Benin was graciously donated to eHealth Africa without consultation with the Benin MOH and the key actors in Benin. The Vaxxed NGO had been dissolved to escape the legal consequences of these acts. The same actors were recruited. They dissolved the Vaxxed US NGO, and they were all recruited by the eHealth Africa NGO, and peacefully they continue the same activities. No mission for the achievement sustainability has been put in place in Benin. Neither the Benin MOH nor the Africa managers of the project have any idea of the real costs of this project. There was a great lack of financial transparency. The project has supported field visits, trips for the US, fast-track US staff, US public health students, US consultants with field visits of at least 3 to 5 visitors every 2 months. Flight tickets, accommodations, per diems, health coverage, and internal displacements were covered against only 1 trip planned for the manager of the US, of the Africa manager of this project to the US during the 5 years of the project. Five years after this great experience, Benin is still facing the challenge of vaccination data quality. It was a sad experience of North-South Development Partnership that illustrates the eternal renewal of development initiatives in Africa. In conclusion, the Vaxxed program in Benin was a real false bargain.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your
attention.
very busy work schedule to, share this with us, Fidel. To be transparent, I was one of the counterparts on the Vaxxed project for a time, for about 1.5 years, leaving to work for the Ebola response later in 2014. So I was very glad of all the learning that you shared with me, and some of the conclusions you're presenting were issues that you had highlighted early on in the project pilot. And I think out of this, what do you hope are some lessons majorly learned, key takeaways that especially Western NGO workers and, donors should really learn from the sustainability of the Vaxxed project?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
No, not well.
Oh,
The
okay.
network.
No, that's okay. So I asked, based on this, what is your hope for changes in projects like this in the future?
My hope is that we in this kind of projects, we are focused on the Paris Initiative. That gives more involvement, more engagement in all process of partnership for development between the northern and the southern organizations. So we have to be responsible, to be put in front to design, because in this project we designed everything, all the ideas for giving a body to this project design, implementation, management came out from Benin. But you can search for the final report of this project. Our names were not inside.
That is a huge finding that many of the presenters have mentioned, is acknowledgement of national experts and national collaboration. Often, the Western actors get the props, but it's really, the people in the South, in countries like Benin, doing the hard work and coming up with the main ideas.
That is it, because the acknowledgement of the local capacity is one thing, very important thing that we have to master in the development process, because all these initiatives most of the times are capitalized, like if these main ideas came from this northern part, or as Africa, living and working as experts, we better know about the field. And this is a thing that make people very not sometimes you see what your main idea been collected, cached, and come back to you as I think you have to learn once more again. So I think that we have to capitalize all these local capacities, all this ability of taking actions, of vision, local vision to implement all these projects in the southern part.
No, these are very important messages, and as someone who was your colleague, you were my manager. You were gracious enough to help teach me a lot of this when we worked in field together. And I'm very grateful for all that you do to really advocate for the voice of African expertise, sustainable, meaningful projects and policies driven from the ground up. And this hopefully will be a good case study for organizations to learn in the future how to not have so much great success and then have it all fall apart, to know sustainable benefit of the country that was giving so much resource to helping it, happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are recording.
Do I just start? Oh, I thought you were going to introduce. Sorry, can we can we start over? I thought you were going to introduce.
We're recording.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Dragar Shalom Zumunya. I'm a consultant working with an amazing firm based in South Africa called Nashiluva Consulting. We do a lot of work around gender, human rights, child protection, just ensuring that the rights of women and girls across the region are looked out for and promoted. And so today I'm going to be speaking on the funding landscape in Africa. And I think that this is a really key discussion and conversation to have, because there's so much, I believe, that we're yet to learn. There's a lot that we need to share. There's a lot of transparency that needs to happen in order to ensure that funding really does speak to the needs on the ground, in order to ensure that funding is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, which is to fund initiatives that are aimed at advancing the lives of all people. And so this presentation is really going to look into the funding landscape on the continent through the lens of a development professional, me, based in Southern Africa. And so just to start off, I'd like to give a bit of an overview. So roughly Africa receives about 50 billion in international assistance every year. Of course, the amount varies each year, but roughly on average, it's about 50 billion, which is quite a bit of money. However, there are also some issues around the distribution of this money across the population. And to be more specific, the distribution is not very equal. And I'll get into a little bit of that further on in my presentation. And another thing to note as I'm giving an overview is that the funding model as of now is mostly tailored to supporting INGOs and larger development cooperatives, and not so much the smaller local indigenous organizations that are, at national level, at community level. And we're also facing issues of systemic racism, which can be traced even in this funding system and the support that's given to local-led initiatives. And so I would also want to get into some of the realities on the ground, what's really happening on the ground in Southern Africa. So what we're finding is that funding needs to speak to needs on the ground. And what I mean by this is that we often have cases where donors or funders will reach out and say, we have this amount of money and this is what it's supposed to cover. And so what that does is it limits the local initiatives, it limits the people in the communities from developing their own solutions, from identifying the issues that they feel need to be addressed. So it robs communities of self-identified needs, and it also robs them of flexible long-term funding, technical, organizational, and programmatic capacity support, because oftentimes what happens is with these local organizations, they have a very good understanding. They are the experts of the issues that they face in the communities. They know exactly what the issues are, and almost all the time they know exactly what needs to happen to solve these issues. But because they're not really funded and given the support they need, they do not have the right programmatic support, they do not have the right capacity that they need and the support they need in order to carry out this work. And so funding tends to not get to them. Another issue that we have that's a reality on the ground is that at times when the funding does trickle down to the local organizations, it's often very small scale and very short-term projects. And so we have a lot of donors that will come and give grants for 3 months to 6 months. It's very rare for local organizations or initiatives to get funding for more than a year. So usually the funding is limited to 3 months to 6 months. And what this does is we find a lot of local-led initiatives starting projects in communities, and things start to look up. There seems to be some progress, but then because it's only 3 months, that's not enough time to create any sort of change. That's not enough time to create any behavior change. It's not enough time to influence policy. It's not enough time to influence any sort of programs from governments or other initiatives. And so there's really no sustainability. So we have a lot of mushroom initiatives across communities that start and never get to reach completion because there's just not enough funding for them. And we also have an issue where locals are not really being recognized as experts and are severely underpaid as exposed to the expats that come into the country. And so oftentimes for positions that would otherwise have local people qualified to fill them in, a lot of INGOs would rather recruit someone from the global north to come to the global south and take up this position. And then they live in the country as an expat on expat status. And we all know that comes with immense benefits. There's a lot of money that's attached to that. And so the other positions in the organizations are then left for the locals in the country. And there's quite a huge discrepancy in terms of the pay, the wage, the compensation. And so this is really an issue where locals are not being recognized as experts. I know a case personally, a friend who was, he qualified for a position in one of the INGOs. However, because it was cheaper to contract him as a consultant every 3 months and renewing his contract every 3 months, rather than taking him on board as the expert that he is, they did this for almost 2 years. Just on contract basis, just renewing a contract for consultancy, just because they did not want to take him on as staff. And then when he eventually, decided to quit and leave that job, they were able to get someone from the Global North to come and fill in that position as a full-time, doing the same work that he was doing, the same job description. So these are some of the issues where locals also then start to feel really frustrated because they're not recognized as people who are capable of doing the work. And so the barriers that are preventing more funding from reaching African NGOs exist across the grant-making process, from funders lacking targeted strategies to fund African NGOs and sourcing practices that are not designed to identify these organizations, to the provision of funding that does not ensure long-term sustainability of African NGOs. So I think this is speaking to the model that is being used to allocate funding, the model that's being used to recognize who needs funding and who doesn't. At times, the people who need the funding are not on LinkedIn. At times, the people who need the funding do not have access to websites, but they're doing tremendous work in the communities. And so there's really need to look into some of the barriers that are preventing more funding from reaching African NGOs. And so now I just want to speak into impactful funding and sustainability, because I think that if we're going to use money or spend money on initiatives, we might as well make sure that this money is being spent on initiatives that are going to be impactful for communities, initiatives that are going to be sustainable for communities. And so relevant, impactful, and sustainable funding is extremely key, because not only do local organizations play a distinct role in the African civil society ecosystem, but also their proximity to communities they serve imbues and empowers them with particular assets that enable them to deliver differential impact. And so I'd like to give an example of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still ongoing. When COVID-19 hit, we had a lot of funders pull out funding, a lot of funders who realized that they suddenly could not fly to certain parts of the world, to other countries. So they were limited in terms of mobility. And what people immediately realized was that that's the power of local initiatives. That's the power of communities. We are in the communities, we live in the communities. And so if we had the capacity to intervene, if we had already had our capacity built, and if we already had enough funding to influence in our communities, COVID-19 was not really going to, it was not going to be so much of a hindrance, because we would then have the support, the funding, and the know-how on how to deal with these issues with the right support. And so that's one example of the unique role that African civil society organizations play in this ecosystem. We are right there in the communities, and so allocating more funding to local organizations that are based in communities will actually be a better option. And so, yes, so the COVID-19 pandemic has put a spotlight on the importance of ensuring that African NGOs are well funded, with many key international actors that had to withdraw from the continent once the crisis started with the COVID-19 pandemic. African-based NGOs had to stretch already overextended budgets to augment government health and humanitarian interventions. So building strong and robust and supported and effective local organizations is actually essential as a means of not only responding to global crisis, but also addressing the day-to-day and continuing needs of local communities battling poverty and the different forms of global inequities. So that's the importance of investing in local initiatives. And so as I round up my presentation on funding landscape in this part of the world, I just want to talk a little bit about decolonizing aid and why it's so important. So the idea of decolonizing aid really can take many forms in action, from localized leadership in programs on the ground to increased funding. And so what this means is looking into issues of cultural competency. So if it's a program that's meant to address female genital mutilation, should we not have someone from the community who can speak on this issue, who can be against this issue, lead this program, rather than having someone who's an expert, who's learning about these issues, who might not really have an understanding of these issues, come in and try to lead these programs. And so decolonizing aid is recognizing that people in Africa have the capacity. It's recognizing that people in Africa can and will do the work that they need to do in order to help their communities. And so it's about letting go of this need to control and allowing people in Africa to lead their initiatives, and also increasing funding to them. So fundamentally, decolonization means decision-making being in the hands of people directly impacted by aid and development programs and not anyone else. And so with that said, I would like to hand over to Tambu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rugare. Ooh, quite a mouthful there.
Thank you, Rugare. I'm going to be presenting on the top-down interventions, especially the power play issues. And I would like to think that I have access to move the, Rugare, will you help me to move the PowerPoint? Yeah, thank you so much. I think Africa is really aware of the dynamics of the top-down approach, and I think the power dynamics because of the funding. And I think we have noted over the last many years, I think we've been talking about decolonizing aid. We've been talking about having the voices of the communities speak to their needs, their priorities, and also how they can work around that. And yet over time, we've continuously seen a sort of very much prescribed way of how African communities are going to receive funding. And I think I want to speak to the voices that matter. And I want to speak to where we are working in sub-Saharan Africa. My name is Tambuzai Mzenda. I'm based in Johannesburg. We work across sub-Saharan Africa through our organization, Nashluva Consulting. And we have been working with different countries as well as representatives in those countries, whether it's at policy level and including donors and communities that we've worked with. So this is a topical issue, I think quite a hot potato at this time, because the work we have been doing over the last 15 years really depicts structural racism, if I may put it bluntly like that, because we see a continued lack of really going into the interventions that require this power shift to happen so that we can see when we begin to talk about Millennium Development Goals, and now we're talking about Sustainable Development Goals, the reality of that is how do we reach those goals? How do we actually see the change? And if we are to, whose voice then matters? In my presentation, I'm just going to really highlight some of the issues at the heart of Africa and the problems that we face. And I think it's a structural problem that we face where we're wanting to shift the power with regards to what we know as problems that we have, what we know as interventions that we have. And yet, even when we do that, the power that be, where regarding aid, begins to sort of, I would like to use the word, rape the system of communities in Africa. A significant proportion of the interventions and programs are prescribed, I think just recently to speak about the pandemic around the COVID-19 pandemic across the globe. And yet in Africa, something that happened that we all could see was how immediately the international experts or the INGOs shifted their experts out of the countries, especially in Africa, obviously because of the dilapidated health systems, also because of perhaps it would be the end of that era with COVID-19 in Africa. And we saw that, and I think it was a really concern that then what happens to the programs? But I think we also noted that those programs continued. However, a lot of that work that continued virtually, and the restrictions really emanated into a place where maybe it's an opportunity that we saw that Africans could actually do it. But at the same time, the prescriptions around how the program should be done, how the money should be spent, remained as such. And it really constrained any progress that could have taken place. Also, considering the fact that the experts were not in those areas where they're working. And I think foreign aid and the soft powers that come with it are perhaps something that we maybe consider when we talk about collaborations. But I think the admission to this kind of society that holds the power in terms of money and the context of what they want to work on, whether there are different programs that affect communities, and yet they are not necessarily those interventions that are needed on the ground. In this presentation, I'll really just sort of speak to some issues. I've already highlighted them. I think they're quite clear. But I want to give two examples. We have a top-down intervention. And when you think about two examples that I'm giving here, is it calls for grassroots or national funding-based donor aid designs or models that are very restrictive to local needs. What does that mean? It means the people that are sitting somewhere in the global north make a decision on what that country requires or what is a need that they see they could fit their experts to work on. And this is something that, you know, when we begin to unravel these, we are unable to give you context that has research-based understanding to it. For reasons that this is something that we have no studies done on it. There are few reports because those reports have to be done independently to really speak to this kind of situation. And so there is a scarcity on this data. But we have worked with communities for a long time, and we see this constantly in the work that we're doing, where we are coming in as an organization, having worked in Africa, having understood different communities that we're working with, to really work on the interventions. However, it is problematic where restrictions are there with regards to understanding the context to meet the needs of the communities. And what we talk about interventions, sometimes they're far off to the needs of the communities. So the INGOs prescribe programs, and, you know, we continuously have these jargons that are used, you know, different approaches and the planning that has to be done with the locals or maybe even with governments around engaging communities. But the reality of the matter is, I think the buy-in between the government and the donors is, I think a very prominent space of decision-making. And yet, those who actually are the beneficiaries, those who actually have the voices that matter, are not heard in this process, which means it becomes a very top-heavy, which means the intervention is very limited in terms of what it does in changing the lives of those in the communities. And the prescribed, of course, interventions really become problematic because you're using a model that does not work in the context. So the results or the impact is very minimal. And it also takes time to then work with that community to try and use the jargon, the concepts that are being used to get that going. So there is always what they term capacity building that is to take place. And I'm thinking to myself, having been in this industry for more than 25 years, how come African NGOs or people of color in these NGOs continuously have to get capacity. And yet I don't recall attending a workshop in the Global North where international experts are being inducted or being made to understand the context of where they're going to work in. The factors contributing to prescribed interventions, a lot of them really, I think, based on some work that we've done, communities that we've worked with and experiences, speaks to, perceptions of the government capacity. There is a perception of governments being corrupt. There's a perception that technical skills are better off if they are Western or they're coming from the Global North. The workload is also, something that when it's given, we have experts here who then end up becoming a pair of hands. So there's a lot of administrative work based on, well, your capacity is so much, so we need an expert to oversee that. And the tight deadlines associated with calls or funding, and meaningful engagement with locals, these take such a short time, because sometimes I think what happens, I don't know what happens in these boardrooms, but it looks like there is a time when funding just comes and it has to be released, it has to be spent. And yet where it's being spent, you don't see the result, obviously because of the time, the engagement that needs to take place. And the people who must be engaged in these are the beneficiaries, are the communities whose voices should speak to what they need. And some organic knowledge, even indigenous knowledges around this is what we need. Our terrain speaks to this, and this is what we want. And that doesn't happen. So we have this modeling of one size fits all, and that has not stopped. So you have different jargons and concepts that are being used, but that has not stopped. There is limited evidence generation from the Global South. Obviously, there is not enough time. There is not a level of understanding the constraints that are there. Also the skills sharing or skills in actually having these experts come in and leave these skills in this country so that there is sustainability. So these are sort of contributing factors around these interventions. Really, I think they render programming and development in Africa inoperable, because whilst there is this dictation over what needs to change, that constantly is not happening, obviously because there is a sort of a system that holds this. And in some, you may begin to think that it's a process that continuously siphons money into programs in Africa to just continuously do that and not to see progress. And, the siloed sort of M&E programs, some of them are so largely impossible to manage. And I think my colleague already highlighted the fact that you have funding for such a short period, and yet the work that would require you to have a really great result of the work cannot take place because it's too short. The funding ends, then you almost have to start again when you have to get another tranche of funding that comes in. And sometimes with a different agenda in terms of the themes that somebody wants to work in, So you start with SRHR and then you end up with gender-based violence. You've missed the mark in terms of continuation around that work. But this is actually what happens. And I think it restricts growth, it restricts impact, it restricts capacity, it restricts skills and learning for even those communities. And I think the large repositories of underutilized program data has potential to be translated into evidence guide for further interventions, but these include voices from communities. And I can attest to having read reports that are sent to donors, and they are meticulously screened that the voices on the ground are limited. And you have a huge data process of continuous limitations, and lack of capacity. And I think the other issue around this is the data and privacy concerns. And with the POPI Act now, that really begins to bring a different constraint where in the Global South, we are sort of an open case where people just come in, international organizations just come in, and they want the data. And to begin to think about where do we also get the data in terms of what has caused for you to come in? What has caused for you to consider this process that you are undertaking? And I think out of all this that I've spoken to, there is really a need to reimagine funding. And it has to be relevant, it has to be impactful, it has to be sustainable, change at community level. And this comes when community members determine their own and drive a change process that is contextually relevant. This comes when actions are taken to address underlying system, the root causes of concern, rather than reacting to symptoms. And this is something that I believe that if we were to reimagine this, it means the power dynamics almost you actually have to turn them upside down, that the donors have to actually be listening and saying, we hear you. We hear that this is the challenge. How do you see us bringing this intervention? How do you begin to see us having this response? And the community voices and the realities and the priorities, I think I want to just sort of close this. And it's important that if we're going to reimagine funding, it requires that communities map their own areas of interest, of focus, of priorities, and determine and define how they want to see that change. It allows for accountability, it allows for responsibility, it also allows for change and sustainability in those communities. And I think it's a shared vision that we want to think about, and to also think about what are some of those challenges across different communities, and being able to actually map those out and say, if we bring monies for a community in Malawi, for example, what are the challenges and how many more other organizations are working around that, so that there is working collectively instead of then also having organizations competing for this small pie as it's growing to be a smaller pie, but to also listen to the voices of communities, because change will not happen if it's coming from the top and the bottom is always just on the receiving end. Just take what you can. Let's give you whatever we think you deserve, instead of how else can we do this differently, and what would you like to see as change that can be sustainable for children, youth, and women in the Africa region. And so I want to thank you, and just really also consider, what is possible? What is possible is to really think about funders that need to adopt a complex system and approach analysis. And this involves really understanding the choices being made by individual donor actors and their position, power within the system, and the relationships and networks between actors in the system as a whole. And I think there needs to be people talking to each other. If the Global North and its funding and aid is to really make a difference, I think there needs to be an accountability. I think there needs to be a transparency. And I think the bureaucracy that really constrains development for Africa has to be considered in relation to skills, in relation to building relationships, and also totally owning the process and acknowledging that neoliberalism and structural racism exists. If we can accept that, then I think we may find a possibility to work differently. The possibilities are many. Why? Because we see a change that could help us around this. And I think I'm going to leave this to my colleague, Tony, to speak to.
Thank you, Tambu. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Adding on to what Tambu has said, the issues on this slide are linked to a previous slide. Rogare, could you go back to the slide on factors that contribute to right? So before I explain the last slide, I'll add on a bit to this. So with every program, say donors put a call for funding, you fund maybe 5 NGOs to work in a country. Each organization has its own M&E systems, etc., its set of indicators to report to the donor, correct? And then in the end, as Tambo has highlighted, the data from the community has been summarized to just show the impact to the donor based on what the organization implementing this program committed to. So yes, we do have local level data, but there is never time to actually sit down and analyze the community needs, because what we committed to is implement the program, acquit the funds, and then report to the donor, and then hopefully put a case for the next funding cycle to continue the program, right? So in the end, all the data that is collected from the community is never really utilized because there's nobody who's going to look at it. And it comes down to these siloed M&E systems. Among NGOs, I don't know if anyone has ever seen many NGOs with linked or integrated monitoring and evaluation systems. The only one you have is in the government, and the government system doesn't really cover every indicator that NGOs capture data on in the communities. So in the end, we know we have data, but we don't have access to it. Say, for example, with the government system, you can apply for access, you can get the data. But what do you do with NGO systems? So that's one of the problems we have. Yes, we do implement programs. Sometimes they work well, and sometimes they don't. But we are not adequately documenting or capturing what the local needs are. But the data is there. Sometimes some people start initiatives with their local resources, but because they're a small organization, they never get recognition for it. It's never documented, it's never out there, which goes back to what Tambo has highlighted about websites, LinkedIn, etc. They are not there, so they are never acknowledged, they are never recognized, but they're actually doing the real work, the change you want to see in the community. So with that briefly, now we can go to the last slide. So the pool of donors, really, from Rugare's presentation, the donor community is linked, right? And all of these reports are going to them. So how about for once, we get a repository of all these programs. They verify these reports, right? And this is evidence generated from the Global South. Yes, we know it's not peer-reviewed or anything, but at least it makes a start for great literature to plan next programs. So how about at least for once, we start investing in an actual database so that if you want to fund a program in Somalia, at least go through previous donor reports, identify local, consider what the recommendations were, what did they learn from those previous programs, and at least make sure that everyone else has access to it. That's the first start. Now, because all of these reports, they go to the donors, you know, with academic research, when you publish an article, you put a data sharing policy, right? So for once, if donors want some change and we actually want to promote actual utilization of all this local level data that has been collected for decades, let's put a clause in these funding cycles. Once you have submitted the donor report, it's accepted. Let's put a data sharing policy. Okay, maybe the GBV program, okay, data is sensitive, seek approval so that you can do maybe further analysis to actually generate community evidence. So at least let's have that for a start so that everybody can get more access. There's more utilization of the data that we are collecting day in, day out. I mean, every donor report, every funding cycle, we have to commit to a set of indicators to report on the impact we made. How many people did we reach? How many people benefited from the program? How many are benefiting from WASH initiatives, you name it. But that's not all the data we collect. There is more we collect on community needs. How most programs now, they have CSS surveys. These client satisfaction surveys, who's utilizing this data? Is it included in donor reports? Where is it lying after the program? We have it, but who's using it? But that's the local level data. Every program is vying for amplification of these community voices, but nobody's utilizing the data. So yes, we are doing a lot of good things, but because of time constraints, because nobody is funding us to actually utilize more of this data, it's just there, lying somewhere, unutilized, forgotten. And then we wait for the next funding cycle, which then links to Rugare's issue of decolonizing the aid. Because as soon as the program cycle ends, I've submitted my donor reports, my contract ends. So I'm done. I have to look for a new job. The next person comes, they put on their own set of indicators. If we had an M&E system, they integrate whatever they need to do, then the next cycle begins. And data accumulates over and over, probably gets deleted. And then what happens to the community voices that we actually wanted to amplify? So maybe if we could start from there, because when the Global North designs a program, what did they consider? Did they test a model, say somewhere, or they just found it in literature from an academic publication and then thought, oh wow, this looks like it's a nice model, let's try it in Africa? But is it how it's supposed to work? We have evidence, but we don't have the resources and we don't have the time to actually go through the data because it's not supported. It's not part of the funding cycles. So all of this data dies a natural death, but that is actually what we want to amplify to make the actual change we want to see. So I think both the Global North and us in the South, we end up shooting ourselves in the foot because, you know, who has money is the king. So if we could start by seeing that change, that desire to actually generate, amplify community voices to make the actual significant change. I'm not talking about human interest stories. I mean, we all do that, generate propaganda, and it works. Yes, the donor is happy. We interviewed a grandma somewhere out there in the village. She's very happy. She got WASH benefits. But then what of next year? What does he really need so that we make this change sustainable? What does this girl who's going to school need so that she feels safe on her way to school? What does he need so that we continue having safe water at school? What does he need in terms of sanitary hygiene? So we have the data, but we are not using it because nobody is actually looking at it. So if for once we could convince the Global North to make some innovation. I know there are a lot of databases on a lot of things, be it business, you name it, around evidence from the Global North. For a change, let's focus that to the Global South. So if we could build that, I think now when somebody speaks about issues in the Global South, community concerns, community needs, we are all speaking on the same page because we all have a central repository which we all refer to make the actual change. So with each program we develop, then it feeds into the repository so that the next program can continue from where previous funders have achieved. That's all we are asking. I'm sure it's not much, but this cycle of breaking the program, stopping funding, conditions to say maybe we fund you because there's a national of ours in your country or in your organization. I think that's where we are missing the point. So if we could at least address that, then the rest falls in line. I think this was the last slide. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Decon T. Davis. Decon T. Davis is regarded as a living miracle. Her father calls her the resurrected, but not even she is sure how she survived. All Decon T. Davis knows is that she caught the deadly Ebola virus and lived. Speaking exclusively to news.com.au from Liberia, the 23-year-old admits she is one of the lucky few to not only survive, but is now immune from the virus, which has so far claimed thousands of lives. But in a tragic twist, the same virus also claimed the life of her fiancé, Peter, who is also the father of her 5-year-old son, James. Despite losing her partner, Ms. Davis, who was released from the hospital last month, is now determined to help other Ebola victims and survivors, and is one of 8 volunteers now working at Liberia's first interim care center for Ebola orphans, established by Child Fund in the capital, Monrovia. Ms. Davis has earned a degree in social welfare and continues to support research on psychosocial support and child protection in Liberia. She is also a survivor and former refugee from the Liberian Civil War. As both an Ebola survivor, advocate, and response worker, she will share about how INGOs and ministries treat grassroots volunteers, civil servants, and advocates for development, particularly during pandemics. She provides perspectives on how North-South and South-South partnerships can be more sustainable and equitable. Our next presenter of the day is Patrick Faley. Patrick is the Social Mobilization Coordinator for the Mitchell Group supporting health programming for survivors of Ebola. In 2014, he helped initiate the Liberia Ebola Survivors Network with the mission of recognizing immediately that many survivors face great stigma, including losing friends and family. He realized that international community and the local and national NGOs would be able to come to their aid, so they organized as a formal group working with the Ministry of Health in December of 2014. His work has been published in peer-reviewed journals. Patrick also has experience working in human resource departments, especially in the private sector.
Thank you. I'm grateful for the platform, and I'm Decon T. Davis, for Ebola survivor from Liberia. I work over the years with Ebola survivors, and their experience are various. I firstly started working with kids, suspected cases. These children, parents came down with Ebola, and they were at the ETU getting care while we care for their kids at the interim care center. And these kids might likely have Ebola or not. So we observe them over the period of 21 days. And if we notice signs and symptoms, then that shows Ebola, we will take them to the hospital. And if they are positive, they get treated. And if they are negative, they will also get treated from all of this and get back on the interim care. So I stayed there working as supervisor and caring for kids for a year. And that was actually a great experience. All of the staff there were Ebola survivors. So we had no doubt or fear, well, to give these kids our all as parents while their parents were sick. Our challenge, at times our kids will fall sick and be Ebola positive, and our prayers normally is our child should survive. Our child should survive this virus because we know that it was actually terrible for us being survivor through the process. So if you care for a kid and you know that a kid is positive for Ebola, you know how you were treated and you know what it takes, the pain. So no one will actually want an underage child to be affected. But we never have our own power to say a kid should not be affected of Ebola. All prayers were to God that our kid should come true. My worst time with the children that I care for was I lost a child. I lost a child that memory still affects me now. Because my wish was what I could do to that child survive from Ebola. This child was the age of my own son. And this child, I got too close and connected to this child because of the child murder. When the child first entered the home, the only thing I could hear from that innocent child that my mother really loved me. And if I die, my mother won't survive this. So being in the ETU and hearing that same quote from my son on the phone, it broke me down when I saw that innocent child at age 5 saying such a word to me. But caring for him, he refused to eat. He refused to even play with his friends. He refused to go to any other staff, only me. So I drew close to him and I started talking to him and he got relief. But the days that he did not eat, he broke down and he felt sick. When we took him to the ETU, that child mother was discharged the same day we were caring that little boy. And we took him there. Unfortunately for us, we lost him. There was no way we could share that information with his mother. His mother came to us at the only thing we could tell her that our son is taking treatment at the hospital and he will be better. And this girl has suffered from Ebola and losing her only child. It was actually a difficult movement that I could not even share with her. I could not really say that. It took us time, and she keep asking, how can this be? I was at the treatment unit, and actually, I know the time I stayed there to survive, but this I cannot stay this long. Can somebody tell me the truth? And we have to call from health ministry that they disclose the information to this lady because she's actually suffering. She needs to know the truth. And she will call, and the news broke her down. It was not an easy one. It was actually a terrible one. And actually, that child death is actually a trauma for me up to now. I miss that little child. And I could not do anything to save his life at that movement. So at times, I blame myself. Why this innocent child lose his life, I cannot afford giving life to that baby. And with that, We fought greatly. Our kids, 3 months, 2 months, they were surviving. And I had a 2 months old baby that survived and lost her mother also in the treatment unit. And the family was like, we don't have nobody to care for this little child. How can this child survive with the family? When we went to reunite the child, that baby with the extended family, it was terrible. Because the grandmother very old, and we have to find a family or adopted family to care for that baby. And the family have been appreciative that they are happy that the child is actually in good hands. But it was both positive and negative. If our child survived, we celebrate. If our child died, we won't grieve it because it is not even our dream. It is not even our dream. And being a survivor, I can tell you, is a great experience. Going in the hospital, being treated, and coming out is actually a great experience. And it was good. My family greatly supported me. My family supported me. They were in prayer with me. They did not stigmatize me. Even on my hospital bed, I was never stigmatized. My uncle that was on the front line in helping me through this process with all support. He did well. And I lost him 2021, January 10th. He was my superhero. He stood as a father in my life. And when I saw people in that hospital dying, people really died. Our hospital, our health system was bad enough, and we were not up to task force to tell you we lose life. The hospital was filled, no bed. We were only begging to stay outside the yard for treatment. My first 1 week, it was terrible. There was no way that I could survive, no way I could talk to anyone. I was so helpless. People all dying around me and no way to even talk. But God being God, on treatment, I was able to survive. And it was the grace of God that I survived. And being there, I was responding to all doctors' advices. I should take my medication. I will get back home to my family. I accepted, I responded, and I obeyed the doctors. And communication with my family back here, it was bad for me because my family was affected greatly with stigma from the community. We supply water because we have a drinking pump in our yard. Because of my illness, everybody could not come to our community, our yard to get to fresh water. Because of my illness, because of my illness due to Ebola, my family could not get food from the market. Our community market said my family money is actually affected with the virus. If they hold the money from my family, they will be affected. At that time, my son was of age 5. He could not play with the children in the community. His friends will tell him, your family, your mother is suffering from Ebola. So you might likely be an Ebola patient, so we cannot play with you. Look at the trauma of a child of age 5 was carrying because of his mother. It was actually a huge tax for my family. It was really hard. No food, nobody to identify with them until my uncle James S. Davis got the information and started helping the family in our home village. That's how they were able to survive. Out of the ETU, that same uncle came for me at the hospital. So I noticed something about him. When he came, while coming out of the hospital, he brought a taxi that I should get on. And try going near him, he will be walking faster. So I told him, are you stigmatizing me? He said, no, I cannot do that. I said, but I noticed that I try coming closer to you and you going far from me. But you see journalists around looking at both of us. If you stigmatize me, I will tell the media. And I how he laughed about it. And he was able to hug me. And we took a photo and we shared phone. And his statement was, your graduation is the best. And the graduation that he was referring to was leaving the ETU. Because seeing death and surviving from it is a whole different scene. So he called that my graduation is the best. May your soul rest in peace, James S. Davis. You really, really fought and stood by me as a father. I appreciate all. And I came home. God helped me. People started. When I came home, my family accepted me. My family accepted me. We did everything in common. I was never left off. Any other Ebola survivor that their family had to throw them out of their houses because they survived Ebola, they must share the Ebola virus with their family back home. They accepted me, they embraced me, and we were happily living together. Only for the community, few did not actually believe that people could be safe from Ebola without transmitting it or spreading the virus any longer. So I noticed a big stigmatization in the community. But when time went back, I started sharing awareness, my experience, telling them that I cannot affect nobody, but I can save lives. It started coming around and learning from me. And with that, our community got healed from that. Our community actually got healed from that. So that was a great experience. And after leaving a Ebola treatment unit, Dr. Jerry Brown was a father to me there. He encouraged me and he really did what he could do in the impossible way helping me. So my word was to him, if I survive Ebola, anything that it would cost me to, that someone survive Ebola after me, I'm willing to do that. So when he did his research and wanted to do blood transfusion from Ebola survivor, he contacted me. He said, you gave a promise, right? And you have survived. Can you live by your promise? I said, what was that? Can I remember? He said, I want to do a test on your blood. There's a patient in this hospital that is not good, and we want to do that blood has a sample to see whether your blood can help us survive. I said to him, you are a medical practitioner, and in your own way, if it will not affect my life, I can do that. And he told me that there will be no side effect and nothing was going to happen to me. I told my family about it and they agreed that I'll go on that journey. And actually, I donated the blood, and Dr. Jerry Brown told me that the person actually survived from the blood that was given. So my family wanted to know the person so that they can have relationship with him. And Dr. Jerry Brown said it was not ethical before our family feel that person owned in their life. So he was never going to disclose a patient to us. And that which I actually appreciating for that. Because we as African, we interpret things differently. And today, we both live in the same country, we don't know each other. So surviving Ebola, I have been helping greatly and having passion to help in other surviving. We also talk about plasma donation. And Dr. Jerry Brown also contacted me again. And when he advised me on the plasma donation, I asked him, will I be saved? I won't be affected? He said yes. I was willing. I went at the plasma donation also just to save life and to add the surviving rate of Ebola survival on the increase. So I was almost a regular plasma donator at ELWA hospital. These are few of the work that I've done since I survived Ebola. Coming to our survival setting in general Liberia, I have been blessed by God, but others are affected greatly. I had a story of a lady that was driven out of her house, her family house, because she survived Ebola. Everyone thought that they could have come down with that virus. So she was thrown out of the house. She had nowhere to stay, and she had no family to call her own. And she came across the great organization called Young Life that was headed by the late James S. Davis. And they embraced her. They actually embraced her. They took her as a family, and she found a new life there. There was no stigmatization there for her. I had a survivor male that lost his relationship because his fiancée said she was afraid that she might be affected because her fiancé is an Ebola survivor, so she cannot continue the relationship with this guy. And the stigma will have for Ebola survivors here. It will actually have. We have to do door-to-door talking and advising and memorializing and people telling them that these people cannot affect you, they can save your life. We had radio talk show before people started to accept Ebola survivors in the community. You cannot get a person that lost all of their family and they are the only surviving person from that family, but still the community don't want to see them. The community cannot accept them. That's a huge trauma for a single person to undergo. So I don't want you to see my story that survivor have not been affected greatly. Survivor have been affected. They have been stigmatized, and it has been a challenging one for us, especially with that talking to them, encouraging them. It has already been a challenging one to believe that. Why is it me? Why should this be only mean that people don't want to see because I survived Ebola? They did not beg for that sickness. Some don't even know how they encounter Ebola. They cannot tell you the actual cause, how they got in contact with the virus Ebola. So they're being stigmatized for illness. They're just being cruel to them. They're actually being cruel. And I admire survivors. After they actually survived, they were united as Ebola survivors. They stood firm for each other. They fought together. And though they were not listened to by the community, by the government, promises were made that did not come forth to them, but they stood their ground that we will not let any of us being played on, we will not let each other down, but we will stand for each other. And that has been carrying us through as Ebola survivors. It has actually been carrying us through. People made promises, it did not work out. Other survivors still struggling now. So if we are talking about survival in general, we should look at the list that survive and cannot even afford a day. It is hard time that they be recognized because there are studies that were done on them years ago that will help the health sector in the world at large. A lot of people came down with sickness. Some people came down with eye sickness. Some people came down with hearing problem. Our male complaint on erection is painful. Were that happening before Ebola? No, I started observing this after I got well. Some female, since they survived Ebola, they have not experienced a sign of pregnancy. So these are challenges that they are going through. Ebola survivors have health issues. Eyesight is a challenge for them. They have health issues. So we have to prioritize them. We Ebola survivors, we need you guys most and more. Those that was able to get pregnant after surviving Ebola, that was great. And still, they have studied on these people that will benefit the world forever and ever. So I don't want you to use them for study and later don't remember them, don't recognize them. We overheard as Ebola survivor that the government was going to help these survivors with resettlement, because if you survive Ebola from the hospital, coming home, they got to disinfect your things then. At times, they will burn your whole room in the sense that you slept on the mattress before going to the ETU and you are confirmed positive. So all of that things that were in your house might be carrying a virus. So a lot of people's stuff were burned. So because of this story, the government said, okay, we'll come in to help up to present. They have not lived up to their promises. And still people are suffering because you only need them when you want to hear from them how it can impact the world, how you can live by example of their story. So survivors from Liberia, they still have challenges. They actually have challenges. But they are living with that, especially those for the health. They are living with that, and we still need people helping in that category, the health challenges. We want that to be looked at. That's for a few that they will help them. We say yes, few of them. And kids were promised We will send your children to school, and since you survive Ebola, no parent, and how will this child continue? These promises die. We have orphans from Ebola survival that are not even looking up to. These are promises our government made. Give all their names. We will get this in our database. These children will go to school. Our kids are out of school. Our kids can no longer go to school because their parents are there who will help them. So we actually need to look into that. For our Western people, the American, we appreciate you. We saw the passion you had for him. You proved it to us. Financially, you supported us. Morally, you supported us. And you even came present to fight this Ebola with us. Today, Liberia is declared Ebola free. It is because of the joint fight we have with you. I can remember in the interim care center, I was very afraid, had visitor enter and had to get out. But I have few American friends say that we are now sisters. They were never afraid of my kids. They were there helping these kids, counseling, playing with them, and it also helped our kids to be healed from trauma. For us, our kids know that we are Ebola survivors, so we are not afraid. But somebody that is not affected with Ebola coming over is stress-free, then it gave them overdose. And I can and play with our kids. Even the Liberians, if they enter, you will see them fully dressed, talking to us. They have to leave distance or miles between we and them before they can communicate.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again so much for joining us today for Unwoke ID. We know that this is a profoundly important topic, and right now we are working through some of the logistical challenges presented by one of the, I think, many roadblocks that we all seem to encounter on a day-to-day basis. For us, it happens to be weather. But I think that it is, in a way, poetic that we are dealing with these kinds of logistic difficulties in a conference dedicated to how to work through these and longer or larger institutional roadblocks in trying to do international development work. So my name is Elizabeth Searing. I'm also an assistant professor here at the University of Texas at Dallas. I would say I talked for a little bit yesterday, but I know I talked for longer than a little bit. So thank you for everyone that joined us then. And I hope that everyone is able to hear and has been enjoying the presentation so far. I'd like to thank the organizers, to Jesse and Camilla for putting this together. And especially coordinating all of our different speakers from all around the world. I think that it would have been easy to put together a program where people like us sitting here in Dallas were able to kind of give our thoughts and opinions, but it's worth so much more to actually empower individuals from all over the globe to talk about this issue. And so what would a conference on being aware of these issues, what would we be if we weren't actually using the opportunity to give a platform to these to all of our fellows around the globe? And I can hear Dr. Hansen DeFusco, so I am going to pitch it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, sadly, UTD has been having internet going on and off, and you just experienced one of our offs. So, here.
And we can see your screen. There we go. Perfect. All right, so everyone, back to the show. Thank you so much.
Wasn't used wisely. Others will have the idea of putting helping Ebola survivors now. For me, my suggestion would be our kids' education. Those survivors that lost their both parents. Those survivors, those kids that are orphaned because of Ebola. Let prioritize education for them. Because if they are educated, we are educating a whole world. It will be a better future leader. So let's prioritize that education. And for the adults, we can look at trade to empower them through trade. We empower them, they go to trade school, get trade, so that they can stay on it for the rest of their life. If we give out $100 today, that $100 will be used and finished. But if they are educated through trade, you can fix a cake, build house, construction, tailoring. That is a lifetime empowerment. You can live on that for the rest of your life. And we Ebola survivors have our own problem. Let me be straight. We had cash that was distributed, but it wasn't used wisely. Others will have the idea of putting that into business. In order, we feel that this is just for me to find food and eat it, and this be my end. So that also had part on us as Ebola survivor. Because you just thinking that this cash was given only for now, and the cash is over. You are not getting free cash any longer. How are you thinking of surviving?
So short-term cash giving.
Cash should be new wisely. Empower yourself through education or business that will keep you for a long time process. So everything that we need now is only education. Meaning for the orphans and empowerment too for the women and both the men. Men can do construction. Men got a lot of things to do. They do plumbing. If the guys go to school, do plumbing, they can help. They can survive only for the rest of their life. But if you just give $100 a day, before the end of the month, the 100 finish, and we even look hungry like we have not even hold $100 before. So the only support is that education. Let our kids be sponsored in school. Let our women be educated through trade, in vocational schools. Then they are empowered for the rest of their life. Those that are serious can grab the idea and make use of it to help themselves and their kids.
That's very poignant, and it gets to a key point that has come up in many of the conversations, which is sustainable support for people who are, victimized or who are stigmatized, the heroes, the survivors of tragedy. And, much of the Western programming, USAID gave lots of money. They partnered with your government to do programs, but the sustainability wasn't there for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And, based on that, there's still millions and millions of dollars going to Liberia and other countries every year for research on Ebola. And, how is that research benefiting or not benefiting survivors?
That's my problem. I do have a problem with the research. If you actually go to, I want to discuss preview a bit. If you go to preview and you do the research, then you see for over 5 years, there is no benefit, only the study. And I think Ebola survivors who have benefited while working in that institution. But if you go, you will see 15% Ebola survivors only working there. And the people that the research fund came for, they are not benefited. They are not benefited over the years. If you go, consent will say, no benefit for you. We only want to do the study for future news. So there is nothing in it to benefit you. Over and over, we have series of meetings about that. Still, there is no benefit, no funding to benefit those that you are doing a study on. So if these people say, we won't go for study, how will you be paid? Because they don't have benefit in the study. So why are they transporting themselves going to the research center to do study on them? And we have tried talking. This over and over. But that complaint keep coming. There is no benefit. Ebola survivors say, if you want to do the research on, then there should be a benefit there for them before the research. Okay, we went with preview for 5 years. We were certificated, and that's the end. I cannot remember the company name or the researcher group, but they came to do research and Ebola survival back off. And that program could not even go for 6 months. They said we will give you half back or rest every after 2 weeks. Survivor said no, we cannot continue like this. And they felt it was true. We called survivor for meeting. Survivor said he cannot go through that research process. And they remain on their own. And for sure the program could not run because you need them. That's a participant. So if research must be done, it should be done both ways. Participant benefit need to be involved. It need to be included. If you say because you are participating in this research for 5 years, I will send you to this trade school to empower you, but I cannot give you the cash because the cash won't last for you forever. You go through the consent form, you empower that person. After the trade school or after the vocational training school, you help them with their material, they start work for themselves. It will last. That's a long-term or everlasting goal. And that has been a complaint years now. Now you ask me, Ebola survival for research. You ask you how much you gave him in. They want to know how much is in it. What's their benefit? If they don't like the discussion, they back off and you won't see them again. But I'm not interested in the hundreds of dollars that will be given in their hands. I'm interested in what you can impact in them that they will live with for the rest of their lives. What they can find their hands doing.
Sustainable benefits.
To survive on. That's the important.
Very important. And it goes to, thinking sustainable and realizing that, people who are affected by viruses have long-term problems because of the virus. It's not just 1 year, 2 years, it can be 10 years or 20 years. And how do we use funding more sustainably than just giving money, which is very much the solution. No, thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for participating, sharing your story.
That was survivors now are out of high school. They are out of high school, no means to go to university. If we were having funding, to get scholarship for them going to university, that would be a better one for them. If they are educated, they will be able to defend themselves in society. And be a great benefit to them. They will not have to beg anybody for $5, but they will be able to apply for a job that they will earn a salary. I'm not saying the cash is bad. I'm not saying giving cash to a survivor. But what about their future? How long will it last?
Thank you so much, Decolonizing. You are so kind to share your story, your expertise, and and to give advice on how to make the system better for people affected. We just here at the University of Texas want to say thank you to you and all the survivors. And, you know, your message is heard when we will share it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the platform and thank you for getting me on board.
Okay, so thank you for the call, and I appreciate as an African being part of the conference. Let me say thanks to Jesse for connecting me. I'm Patrick S. Fale. I joined the team of experts from Liberia on this call. Basically, what am I going to address here is how do the West support African-driven initiatives? How can they best support African-driven initiatives? There are so many ways. I think this time around, the West will be a team player than to be a sponsor. I believe in order for African-driven initiatives to be supported, Africans should be taught the technical know-how. We are all aware Africa is lack of capacity in terms of education. How can we partner together? There are many international and national organizations from the Western diaspora that will come in to carry on all of improvement in Africa. But I believe the level in which Africa has reached is for Western countries to sit at the back and play a partnership role, more like a partnership role. If you ask me for my own personal advice, from the economic perspective, you will realize that we want the Western countries or the West, who have been our long sponsors, to be our partner this time around in supporting, therefore, for example, our agricultural system. They should come and provide the technical expertise, and the Liberian themselves or the African themselves continue working by themselves. So the Western countries can provide the knowledge in agriculture in order to build our economy. That is African-driven initiatives in agriculture. From the political perspective, they could also support our initiative by working with anti-graft institutions, the Liberian Anti-Corruption Commission, the General Auditing Commission. Those are anti-graft institutions that strengthen our political system. It helps to make sure that tax evasion cannot be done in Africa. It minimizes the issue that has to do with tax fraud. If these things are put into proper perspective, it helps us generate more revenue. And when more revenue is generated, you have the trickle-down effect on the economy, a boom of the economy in terms of infrastructure. So our Western partners can help us in driving our own initiatives by being partner. For typical example, I work for the Partnership for Research on Vaccines and Infectious Diseases in Liberia. It's a U.S. joint clinical research program. First, in 2014, Liberia had a gap in research knowledge. Not many of our colleagues in the health sector knew about research. And because of previous involvement in research, most often donors, especially our Western partners from NIH and the rest of the other places that were supporting our research, will tell us, look, we cannot do this because it against our own spending procedures. And you know, yes, this is not the Western country. This is Africa. And if you come in to sponsor a project, you should have African making suggestions to you, and you govern by those suggestions. That's why you are the sponsor. You know, so we could not achieve many things we could have achieved because the African value norms and culture were not followed. So what it did, we sat on the table as Africans and our Western partners to solve the issue. So this time around, Western partners should sit around the table to know exactly what our cultural norms and cultural values. And so as I speak to you, based upon our own engagement, all research institutions in Liberia, especially private research, are now being taken over by African, Liberian, Ghanaians, and the rest of the places. So in 2014, they did not have the knowledge, but now as I speak to you, based upon the partnership. So we want to see our initiatives being supported through partnership, not consultancy, and not to see most of our Western partners come into consult. We want Africa, who that constitute 30% of the natural resources across the world, to see how best they can develop their own natural resources. I mean, technical wise, they should have the technical knowledge. We want our Western partners to support African dream initiatives through providing technical knowledge, providing education, and providing the support, and see Africa as a partner, not Africa as a donor-driven area where people will come and just provide funds, and then I mean, they just leave us undone. And that's the issue that has to do with policy. You know, they are coming into Africa. We want African policy to be strengthened. We want our Western partner to work with our government and not to come and supplant Western ideas. I'm just playing an advisory role here, you know, to not to come and supplant that Western ideas, but to come this time around to make sure that political systems are being followed through Africa themselves, to make sure that natural resources that will be extracted from Africa by African government to be used for infrastructure development and the development of Africa has a lot of natural resources, forest or legislation. And so if the Western partners will come, we will like them to play a more intermediate role, a more role of like sitting at the back, giving so many advice and making sure that all of our anti-graft institutions and educational system are strengthened. Yeah, so these are things we want Africa to benefit from. Partnership. Africa should not be seen as a place where funding will just be provided. Africa should be seen as a partner to Western countries. Yeah, so we have had series of knowledge in these given examples that we are talking about. I can give you practical example. I headed the National Ebola Survivors Network in Liberia 2014. I'm speaking from a health perspective. Western countries came and provided funding for only response. They provided funding for only treatment during the Ebola crisis in 2014. They forgot that after recovering Ebola, there will be post-traumatic stress. And they were not focusing on one health. They were just focusing on what we refer to as messages for treatment and messages for prevention. What happens if someone survives? These similar things are happening during the COVID-19 period. If someone survived COVID, what happened? What happened to them? So what we did here in Africa, in Liberia, we formulated through our partners, some of our partners who are very good at writing, very good at research. We work along with them, write a lot of articles, making sure that the Ebola Survivors Network is formed. It became legitimate under the Ministry of Health, and the government recognizes that institution, making sure that institution serves as a chief advocate for so many survivors across Liberia, not only Liberia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and our own country. So lessons we learned from them, multiples of institutions came out and start providing funding. Many of them doing similar job. Many of them are not even thinking about Ebola survivors recovery. As we speak right now, based upon our own initiative and many of our things that we did here, in helping to make sure the post-recovery program is into proper perspective. Now we can speak to you, it's being used in Congo. As we speak to you, we have been invited to the National Institute of Health and provided a series of presentations. Now, as I speak to you, I mean, they are following our post-recovery program. They are following our Ebola support system, exactly what we did here. And thanks to most of our partners, thanks to including you, Jesse, and the rest of the team, who did extremely well in making sure that our network be a vibrant network. All other institutions recognize our network and make sure that things are moving forward. The last thing I want to speak of is about neocolonialism. You should first understand what does that mean. I don't want to be so racist here, and I'm just serving as an advisor here. Going out of this now that we see the French taking complete control over Guinea, the French taking complete control over Africa, like what the US taking complete control over the Liberian economy, Liberian government. I think what we can do now in this new era, the new dispensation, is to see the colonial masters making sure that our economy is vibrant, working with anti-graft institutions as partners, not bringing in Western propaganda ideas, but making sure that these anti-graft institutions follow the country values and stand for the value and norms and cultures of African. And so we want to see Africa. Africa is a nice place to live. We want to see our partners working along with us, not supporting us, but working in line with us. And so, Jesse, these are things that I believe that Africa can remain as a vibrant continent. Africa can remain as a vibrant continent from the perspective of complete healthcare system, complete health policies. Africa can remain as a vibrant institution for academic, technical, and vocational. Let's take the situation of South Africa. Many African countries have their population 60 to 70% that do not acquire education. When I say education, academic education, because of so many crises that occur in those African countries. So what can we do as Western partners to support African government and African initiative? So Africa, what they did was they work with their foreign partners. They build technical institutions in rural communities. They build comprehensive healthcare system in rural community and make sure that those comprehensive healthcare systems are sustained, those comprehensive educational systems are sustained. And so what we think we can bring similar format to Africa, to Liberia, for whom I'm representing here on this call. Over 60% of our population is made out of young people. What can we do to strengthen the economy if the human capacity is not developed? What can we do to strengthen our economy, to help our partners strengthen our economy when we do not have a complete healthcare system? We do not have a policy. Every institution, individuals that come out from the Western countries, they will come with their own programs, they will come with their own partners. And actually, these programs they are bringing is not program that is needed in terms of priorities. And so what we believe that Western countries should do is to make sure to have an entry, have a community interest into the country, make sure work with the African government and oppositions and other institutions, and ask exactly what do Liberia need, what do Africa need. And if they're having to get these things, I believe Africa will start to receive priority projects. Africa will start working as a partners with our Western partners. So, Africa is a strong continent, and we cannot divulge working with our Western partners, but we believe that our Western partners to sit at the back now and listen to Africa and work with Africa as a partner, not as a sponsor and as a donor, but work with Africa, making sure resources are collected, making sure our anti-graft institutions are put into proper perspective, making sure that our civil society organizations are well put into proper perspective, making sure that our governance system is strong, and making sure that our policies, what we put on books, we should go by it. The only thing that will make Africa strong, not just only democracy, but making sure that what we put on paper is what we do. And in order to do that, we will need our foreign partners, our Western partners, to help bring in education, to help in bring comprehensive healthcare system, a system that will be inclusive to working across Africa, making sure that Africa become a continent that one can look up to.
All right.
Can everyone hear me? Yes, okay, thank you, Namibia. Again, we have Patrick would like to, actually he's on with us currently, and we would like to go ahead and open the floor to him. He's asked that I share some new PowerPoints in addition to his presentation. So let me just pull that up. Can you speak, Patrick? Patrick? Also, we currently have Fidel Mark, who was one of our first presenters. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. And the people who are able to join today would be glad to be available. Yeah, we are trying to work, Jens, with that, yes. Allow Mike. Okay. Patrick,
Hello, good evening. Good
yes,
evening.
I've got you. Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Dr. Jessica, let me say good evening to everyone on this call. I'm so glad to be here as additional presentation. I'm so happy for all of us giving me the opportunity to be here to present to you. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. And I've got your presentation up. Can everyone see it? Can you see it, Patrick?
Yeah, I'm seeing it. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead then.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And so, Dr. Jessica said, I'm Patrick S. Farley. I'm from Liberia. I work for the Partnership for Research on Vaccines and Infectious Diseases in Liberia.
Patrick? This is the internet problem. There you go. We get you back.
Yes, I work with, I'm getting you clear. I work within the Department of Social Mobilization and Community Engagement. Over the period of time when Prevost started 2014, finding means to the Ebola crisis, trying to find vaccines that will prevent Ebola. We did not take into consideration major community involvement that has to do with advisory council. And so with the period of our Western partners that came in, and they were just merely focusing on how to get things started, how to get their sciences to work, how to get their scientists to work. And so last year, based upon our engagement with various community stakeholders, we came up with a decision to have a community being involved totally. And that's how we proposed and formulated the Prevail Community Advisory Group. And so the group, basically, if you check on the screen, look at the screen, it was there to recognize, important community consultation, collaboration. In clinical research, you have to collaborate with the community. You have to know exactly when do you engage the community from a social mobilization perspective. Like, for example, you cannot engage a Muslim community within at the end of the week in our country, because at the end of the week, which is on Friday, they go observe their various prayers. And so things were a little bit difficult. So we have to come with a community advisory group that we develop a proposal, and we establish this group. And as we speak, the group is in in collaboration with Prevail, representing the rural community. Can we please go to the next slide, please? And what was the purpose of instituting or establishing this community advisory group? We realized that cultural norms and cultural values in research, you have to follow the who-be participants. You have to respect their, you have to have right for them and respect their right. Be fair in whatsoever you will do when it comes to research. And we were not observing these things because many a times participants will come and we'll talk to them, but we don't give them more time to ask more questions and so that we can have a dialogue and consultation. And so the purpose of the group is to make sure that communication between the community and the research community. And so this group will make sure that whatsoever feedbacks from their community, from the various communities that we operate in, they will bring those feedbacks to us and we'll sit on the table and see how we can mitigate and find a solution to them. And so if we started first, we're having a community interest. How can we formulate this group? We have a focus group discussion. A focus group discussion is where we meet community leaders to know exactly what will it take to have a community advisory group. How do they look at it? From which perspective? Is it good? Can we have them involved? Can they take initiative of this community advisory group? And so the purpose, there, like I said, to make sure to have virtual communication on issues, ethical issues that might come up within the community, and they will also feedback to us that we can solve the problem with our various clinical research institutions. And so they also will play an advocacy role. Yeah, like I said, making sure that they will give us so many advice, they will recommend to us, and making sure that the research meets cultural standards, it meets ethical standards, because what we observe, research in Liberia will come, researchers in Liberia or Western researchers will come and bring their protocol, and the protocol will be imposed on the country. What do I mean? If you bring a protocol to work within a specific environment in the country, you should respect the cultural value and the cultural norms. If the protocol is already written from Western countries and want to be implemented in Liberia, it won't meet the consensus of the participants. Even though you have met all of your scientific requirements, your ethical requirements from regulatory boards, international regulatory boards, but you need to meet the community themselves and make sure that the protocol is translated into simple English so that they can understand and know with type of fairness, so that they can have ample time to look at it and they will want to recommend and form part of decision making. The people need to form part of decision making research. So our purpose of coming with the community advisory group is to make sure that we have the communication back versa, we have the feedbacks. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the goal to ensure research is conducted in their community, research that is being conducted that is relevant, not just any kind of research. Research should follow international standards. It will have all of the ethical guidelines. And the researcher should also make sure that they follow all of the procedures. And community dwellers should understand, like I just said previously, community dwellers should understand exactly what the research entails. What is the inclusion criteria? What is the exclusion criteria? What is the important, what's the essence of the research? And if they have all of the knowledgeable, if they are knowledgeable about all of these things, if they have the insight, they will be making decisions and it will form part of the research. And so from the beginning of Prevail, we had a very difficult time. Because how can you bring a research within an emergency period, within an outbreak? And so to even sit with community dwellers was difficult. And so right after the outbreak, we decided, look, it would be good to have a community advisory group that will serve within the community with community dwellers, community leaders, so that they can help us to bring in issues that the community will be facing with back to the research. And that created a supportive environment. One of the goals is to create an environment. Sometimes you go in an environment is hostile. We were conducting one study that has to do with cement collection. In the Muslim community, you cannot collect cement. I mean, you cannot collect cement in the manner in which you want to collect it. Even though it meets the research standard, it meets the ethical standard, international standard, but it did not follow the cultural norms of those who want to participate. And so how do we navigate our way around to make sure we have more participants involved into it? We have to have a community advisory group, and we advise the people and make sure, explain the protocol, what the essence of it. If the people got to know the essence, and automatically they started pulling in voluntarily, providing cement, and the scientists were doing their testing. So the community advisory group goals, one of it was to create a supporting environment to ensure research procedures are understandable, to ensure that the team has important information about the community, the team that you want to conduct the research with, to have important information. And so if you don't do that within a research naive country like Liberia, where research is just been known since 2014, it's not been like all African countries, we got difficulties. But however, when they come in with a community advisory group, things begin to pave a way for community interaction. Next slide, please. So the roles and responsibility of the community advisory group, like I said, we weren't having time in entering the community. There were difficulties. There was storming block, and so we needed to have community leaders. So we arranged focus group discussion. We arranged advocacy meeting. Advocacy meeting is meeting with stakeholders, religious community, and participants community, and making sure that they understand the research. And so these things build a genuine partnership. I mean, having the community on the other side of clinical research.
I think, Patrick, you've cut out a little bit. I'll let you try to come back on, but I can go ahead through some of these slides because I have.
Hello.
Hello, Patrick. You're back.
Partnership authentic and make. Hello.
Yep.
Hello.
You're good. Keep going.
Hello.
You okay?
Next
Keep
slide.
going. Next slide.
Next slide. And so we arranged meetings. Meeting we had with, on a quarterly basis, and the community advisory group were being formulated, and meetings were being scheduled as per their desire. They were being contacted by participants, and they were being informed on some ethical issues. We have to take it to the principal investigators, and they came in, they settled those issues, review the protocols, and make sure that the protocol meets the cultural value, even though according to the international standards, it meets all of the international standards. But researchers should not forget that if you want to conduct a research, you have to make sure you have the community involved. So the community advisory group played a very vital role, making sure to cement the kind of relationship, a general relationship between the community and the research community. So in order for a research or clinical researcher or Western partners to have a general partnership, especially from the perspective of healthcare, of clinical research, they should always take the community into a serious account. Make sure that the community is involved and make sure that the community inputs are heard and decisions should be made on the table. Not decisions to be made abroad and that decision will be brought to be supplanted within the research. The community will have a serious resistance. Next slide. Yeah, so based upon that, Dr. Jessica, we are succeeding right now in the previous research. We are going with preview 1, that is the vaccine study. We went with preview 2, trying to know the efficacy of the vaccine. We go with preview 3, the Ebola natural history study. And based upon the community advisory group advice to the research team, the principal investigators, preview now is sailing smoothly, and we have conducted our 12th research program. And this is our 13th research program that we are on right now, working on COVID-19 research. making sure to know how the COVID-19 virus progresses in human, and what are the causes that family member will live in a household and identical person will come down with COVID and the rest of the other group will not come down with COVID. We want to know whether it is because of genetic, whether it is because of something else. The scientists want to know. And so because of our engagement, these things are smoothly going on. We have many people involved in our COVID-19 research. We have many people involved in our HIV research. We have many people involved in all of our research. And as I speak to you, review is sailing smoothly when it comes to research in Liberia. Thank you.
Great. And I thank you for giving more detail about Prevail. It's a good example. It really highlights, as more exogenous shocks happen with, global warming and climate change and war, there's going to be more and more outbreaks, more and more new conflicts that we haven't experienced. And so Prevail does offer a unique insight into how large scale projects can come in. And as you say at first, maybe step on the toes of cultural norms, even though they're being ethical by international or academic IRB standards. There are violations that, Westerners would not know, like Westerners like me would not know if it wasn't for wonderful people like you to advise us and, and stop us from making bad mistakes. Were there any consequences because of Prevail coming in that first year or two, maybe not with as much community partnership as it needed? Was there any feedback in terms of fallout of people participating in the study who were Ebola survivors? And if so, what is a lesson learned from that?
Yes, so yes, there were series of lessons learned from the Ebola natural history study precisely. From the beginning, Prevail started to work along with the Ministry of Health. Prevail is a partnership between the U.S. government and the Liberian government. So the Ministry of Health was playing a more role significant to the research, and then not playing that significant role to the would-be participants. And so lesson learned there is that researchers should always go down to the top, to the bottom if they want to be successful in research, making sure to meet the least participants within that research according to their inclusion criteria, making sure that whenever researcher want to conduct research, they should have a sufficient community engagement, meet with community leaders. A community could be the survivors community, the community could be the HIV and AIDS community, the community could be the COVID-19 survivors community. So if you want to have a research, you should not just take the research from top to bottom, meeting political stakeholders, meeting who you want to conduct the research. We did not do that from the earliest stage. We realized that there were a lot of contentions raised in the survivors, that the survivors were not being looked at as a significant group in terms of the research. And so many of our colleagues, many of the survivors were coming into the research. Many of the survivors were being dropped out of the research, and Prevail had to recalibrate and come back with a more simple strategy by engaging the survival leadership, engaging those who are working with the survivors from the various ETUs that in the various community, making sure bringing all of them on board in a conference, explaining the details of the protocol, explaining the details of the research. Yes, the research is important. The research was important to make sure to follow up the survivors in their post-recovery. But if you did not reach to them from the bottom to the top level, and they were already agitated, they were already angry with their own government because their government did not put in more time for their recovery program. and then you go to the government instead of you coming to them. I think researchers should also take into consideration that whenever you want to conduct research, you should meet those participants who you want to enroll, even though you will meet the government for your ethics and regulatory work, but you should take into consideration meeting the participant themselves. So lesson we learn from there, we have to go back. We did not begin the engagement with the research participants. We left them undone, and we were in the middle of the research. We observed that poor attendance, people were not being enrolled according to our target, and we have to readjust the protocol and send it for RRB the approval and look at some ethical issues, review the protocol, set a committee, and then we came back. We enrolled almost over 900 Ebola survivors. And so, yes, these are lessons that we learned from the Ebola natural history study, and we learned a great lesson.
That's wonderful. No, and you know, there instead of thinking, oh, you know, we failed, it should be almost anticipated. One of the comments that came out from Andiwo Obondo from Kenya yesterday was that, you know, when you're trying new initiatives in, you know, new settings, like in different African nations, you know, you have to let go of these rigid constraints, these rigid expectations that are almost always set by Westerners arbitrarily. Instead of saying, hey, we need to give time and flexibility to be able to change the model based on the feedback we're receiving on the ground, you know, based on unanticipated issues, which, you know, groups like yours are able to fix. So in essence, this is a success story and a good example of how natural, you know, experiments, natural randomized control trials, you know, happen in different countries. It doesn't happen as smoothly all the time. And it requires flexibility and inputs from the people on the ground, particularly people like you.
Yeah, I agree, Dr. Jessica. One lessons that I learned was the issue of our cultural value. In Liberia, if you invite a participant or you invite someone to your house, if the meeting goes for above 30 minutes, you have to provide food. You have to provide lunch for that person. That is our culture. But then the protocol that was the protocol that was written, the protocol that was written for the Ebola natural history study says we could not provide food for participants, and we're meeting them within 1 hour. And it was because of the National Institute of Health policy. It's U.S. taxpayer money, according to the researcher, the principal investigator. U.S. taxpayer money cannot be used on food. So it created a kind of hurdles. It created a kind of major setback in our recruitment process. And so if we go to meet a community, and then the community in a meeting for over 1 hour, 2 hours, we're explaining protocol, inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, trying to explain to them the simplest thing, getting the PR on board, the express on board, and getting the Liberian express on board. And then more than 1 hour, hey, somebody raised their hand and said, oh, are we not going to eat here? We left our business schedule and come here. We have not eaten from this morning. And then on the other hand, the research sponsors, the donors are saying, look, it's NIH money, National Institute of Health money, and cannot be used for food. I mean, for that kind of purpose. And so we justify why it should be done, because when you are conducting research in a research naive country or in Africa, you should respect the norms and cultural values of that particular African country. And so you cannot pay U.S. taxpayer money on food in the U.S., but not Africa, not Liberia. The culture in the U.S. is quite different. Their cultural diversity. So we took almost about 6 months wasting our time we have to fetch money outside of the research and making sure that we meet up with that particular system, because it is a system, it's a culture in our country.
So you had to find resources outside of the study to get participants on board by meeting cultural norms?
Yeah, because it was straightforward measure that you cannot use the United States government taxpayer money from the NIH, National Institute of Health, to provide food. Yeah, that you cannot do that according to them, and they were bringing the funding, and they have the authority on the funding, and so, but we on ground insisted that we cannot recruit. We cannot go to our fellow countrymen and meet them for 1-2 hours and cannot provide water and food. That was against our culture. And so we had to come back on board and have the PR, the principal investigator, sat and found another mechanism to see how best they can find NGOs in the Western countries that could help. And it worked. At the end of the day, we stood our ground, and that NGO came and they provided a lunch. When you go out the site, they provide you lunch. You go at a meeting, you provide water. And I mean, yes, to be frank, we have to outsource, we have to get source for other part of outside of the research in order to meet our cultural values and norms.
Wonderful. Thank you again. I'm going to open the floor via the chat just for safety protocol. You know, we have muted participants who come and go out just because of the sensitivity of this, you know, this conference. We have to be very careful that we weren't hacked or that other people didn't use this as a negative hate platform. But if anyone does have any questions, we're very excited that, you know, it's almost nighttime there, and you've made this happen, that you can join, you and Fidel, Mark. So we would love to, you know, open that up for anyone. Well, it looks like we don't have anything popping up, Patrick. I think your presentation is very thorough. I will share your contact information with anyone who is interested in this. And I just want to say thank you again, you know, to Deconti, to Patrick, you know, to Tambu and her incredible associates, Demita, who helped organize so many of these conference meetings. And then, of course, to Fidel Mark, who gave a presentation in a second language and was very impressively done. These are just incredibly heartfelt, heartbreaking, and inspiring all stories, and just really teach a lot of us, especially in the West, how we can help you best. And that's really our goal, is to advance the dialogue, you know, with you in the driver's seat, telling us how we can help. So I want to say thank you again. Tomorrow we will be having our last day of this conference at 11 o'clock, including starting off with our esteemed speaker, Sakil Malik, who is a highly, highly regarded international nonprofit expert with decades of experience. He has been in leadership positions at top nonprofits that work internationally. You know, born in Bangladesh, working in Bangladesh, you know, and then now working in dozens of nations around the world. A lot of the people that will be speaking tomorrow, in total, the speakers alone have almost 100 years of work experience among them, and they'll be really providing their perspective as people of color from the global South, and now getting to work at higher levels internationally around the world, and really get to give us feedback on, you know, what are ways that institutions for international development are doing it well and are still maybe not doing it quite right. So we hope you can join us tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.